Having fun putting on your cryptanalysis hat and breaking crypto? All right, let's keep going. Okay, so last time we talked about kind of modern symmetric crypto systems like DES and AES. So what are some of the hallmarks of a symmetric crypto system? Yeah. One key, and what does that functionally mean for the system? Yeah.
The key is shared on both sides?
Yeah, in order to communicate, right, the key must be shared on both sides. Awesome. Cool. And we looked at various types of crypto algorithms that implement this. We then can shift to what theoretically could be an actually 100% provably secure crypto system. And this is what's known as a one-time pad. So we talked about this a little bit in the sense of specifically, so how did things like DES and AES, specifically DES, what was their main functionality? Like DES is a function, what does it do? What does it take in? What are its inputs and outputs? Yeah?
I can't remember, it takes in 64 bits and outputs 64 bits?
Yeah, so it takes in 64 bits of plain text and what else?
Oh.
Yeah, the key, right? Whatever it is, 52 bits, 48 bits, I can't remember. You can look it up on the slides. But it functionally takes in a block of plain text, a key, and outputs cipher text that is 64 bits. Cool. So fundamentally, we saw that with ECB mode, right, we can have patterns that reemerge, even if we can't necessarily go backwards and decrypt the text. We can see that some patterns emerge if they're on the order of 64 bits, right? So on 64 bits, because the encryption is on the same, and we have CBC mode to combat that a little bit. So there's another approach where rather than essentially reusing a key, you have a key that's the size of the text that you want to send. All right, let's think about this. We talked about this a little bit in terms of the Visionnaire cipher. So let's say I have, shout out random letters, A through Z. A, Q, what else? T, W, R, what was it? X. Okay, cool. So, if this was a Caesar cipher, how would you solve this? Brute force. You try all possible keys, try shifting it into different alphabets. It's only 6 letters, so Visionnaire would be more difficult, but you could try using those different techniques. So what if we said this was a Visionnaire cipher of key size 6? So how would I go about solving this? Yeah?
Well, you could basically split each of those letter sizes in this case into a unique alphabet.
Yeah, unique alphabet. So I have A, I have Q, I have T, I have W, I have R, and I have X. And now what?
You apply however many translations of A are possible to however many translations of Q are possible, T, so on and so forth.
Yeah, but these are each created with a different key, right? So they're each shifting the alphabet in different ways. So how do I know if I'm correct in this case? What was that?
I don't think that you can know if you're correct.
You don't think you can know if you're correct?
Yeah, didn't we say that with the key the size of your ciphertext, you can't actually technically get an exact answer from there?
Yeah, why?
Because you could arrange.
What's your favorite 6-letter word? Who has a favorite 6-letter word?
Tanner.
Tanner?
Google.
Google, that's a good one. Is that actually, yeah. There we go, perfect. Cool. So, does a key exist that would decrypt this to Google?
Yes.
Yeah, so this would be, what, A to G? This would be basically Q to O, T to O. I don't know what all these offsets are, but you could figure them out. R to L and X to E, right? So using whatever that key is, we could then make this say Google. So what's another 6-letter word?
Devils.
What was it?
Devils.
Devils, that's nice. There we go. Is that right? No. E-I-L? Or okay, writing it vertically is very weird. Okay, so then, is there a key that exists that decrypts this to devils? Yeah. Right? There's a cipher that says, okay, shift the first alphabet from A to D, shift the second alphabet from Q to E, the third alphabet from T to V, right? And so on for all of these. So which one's correct?
No clue.
We have no clue. Why?
Those are both valid words.
They're both valid words, and how did I create the ciphertext? How did I do it? Yeah, randomly from things that you people gave me, right? So, is there any meaning there? I mean, no. But we could still make this decrypt to be whatever we want, right? And every possible key could be valid. So this is the basic theory behind the one-time pad. So here we have a key size that's the exact same size as our ciphertext. And now if we use that to encrypt the message, then all possible plain texts are equally likely, and there's no way for them to know which one it actually is. All right, cool. So,
Question.
yeah.
Isn't that extremely bulky though? Because then you're pretty much sending the same message twice.
Yeah, so, okay, let's think about this, right? So I just sent a 6-letter message from one side to the other. Let's say I need to send another 6-letter message. What do I do? So I have my key, let's call the real key alpha, right? What do I do? I just re-encrypt that message with alpha? No, why not?
Because that's easier to make a key.
So let's say I did, right? So let's say here's message 1, and then message 2 is, I don't know, I'm not going to come up with 6 more letters again, but it's 6 new letters that I've encrypted with alpha. Let's say somebody's stolen both message 1 and message 2. What can they now do? Yeah.
And see kind of what letters or key or might be similar between the two. Going from like
Possibly, but what if the plain texts are completely different?
at least know what the size of the key is. Then.
They'll know maybe what the size of the key is? Okay, this is actually a good question. Let's change our operation to XOR. This whole thing becomes a lot easier then. So rather than shifting like a Caesar cipher, let's say it's an XOR operation. So every character here, like C1, or I guess that's ciphertext 1, and there's alpha 1. So C1 is equal to message 1 XOR alpha 1. Just the XOR operation, which we're all very familiar with now. Yeah.
Can we just take a second and talk about the XOR? Can you kind of, I mean, I get like on the binary level what it does, but like what are the implications? Because they use it in assignment, and I just don't really understand why you want to use that. What does it do?
Sure. So, okay, let's think about, so here I have XOR operation, so I've shifted my crypto system to XOR. And so to get the ciphertext letter 1, I take the message letter 1 and XOR it with alpha, the first letter of the key. So now how do I decrypt? So now I have ciphertext 1, how do I decrypt?
By XORing it with the key.
I can XOR with the key and I get what? The original message, right? So XOR has this great property where it's in some sense reversible, right? So you can do it like this. So you can do that same operation with the ciphertext and the key, and you can get the message. So now let's think about we'll pause that discussion for a second. We'll think about message 2. So how do we get? Okay, I'm running out of characters. We'll say C2, so the, man, all right, we'll change it to D. So second message, the first character of the second message, how did we get that? Yeah. Close. So how did we get, so thinking about how is this string of letters that don't exist created? Right? So we have D1, the first character there must be the, we'll call it capital D. The first character of the second message is plain text, XORed with what?
First character.
The key, alpha 1. Right? And then to go backwards, we have the same thing. So we have, if you take capital D, or sorry, lowercase d, there we go. If you take the ciphertext and encrypt it there, we get D1. So now here in these two equations, right, we have both D1 and C1. Right, so if we go, what is alpha equal to here?
C1.
C1 what?
And then would you XOR it with M1?
M1? And here I have alpha 1 is equal to what? D1 XOR capital D1? Actually not sure where my derivation is going here. That's why you shouldn't try to prove something in the middle of class. Yeah.
Can't you just automatically get what the first key is? Because we know what the plain, no, we don't know the plain text.
We don't have the plain text, but we do have the ciphertext.
Yeah.
It should be the case that C1 XOR D1 is equal to alpha, because they've both been shifted by XOR, so you should be able to go backwards by XORing them with each other. This is also, anybody use or been taught the XOR trick to swap two pointers? Or swap two numbers without using a third variable? No? Man, now, I was hoping somebody would say yes, so I didn't have to remember this off the top of my head. I think it's equal to A XOR B, and B is equal to B XOR A. Where's Max when you need him? Do you know how it is?
Well,
You swap the two values using just XOR without using a third. Is it A XORed again, right, with B? Like this, right? Yeah. So you basically, so the nice thing is, oh yeah, because you mix B in with here. Yeah, okay. So for here you have, there we go. So B XORed with A. So in this step, you have B is equal to B XORed with A XORed with B, right? And these B's XORed together cancel each other out. So if you XOR something with itself, it's 0. And 0 XORed with value is that same value. There we go. Look at us deriving things. So now this becomes B is equal to A. And then here, so this A is here. So you have the final A is equal to A XOR B, and B is actually A. So these A's cancel each other out, and you have A is equal to B. There we go. Boom. QED.
Is there an actual XOR function in like C or something?
Yeah, this operator. That's a binary.
That operator?
Yeah, it's a binary operator. That's why I use this, the caret. Yeah, so it's just like the XOR function that you studied when you look at like circuits and stuff, right? You can do a truth table for it.
So why don't people teach to that whenever you're trying to like move giant arrays of things over so that you don't have to make like a whole nother array?
Yeah, okay, so okay, this is a good question. So what's the difference between this and what would you say? You say temp equals A. Erase these beautiful proofs. Temp equals A equals B equals temp. I don't know, what's the difference between the two? Yeah.
So in the last one you're doing A XOR with B. So B is not equal to A, so you're doing A XOR with A, right? So shouldn't it
In this very last step?
Yeah, so if you're doing A XOR with B, but B now equals A, right?
Yes.
So you're doing A XOR with A.
But A does not equal A. A is equal to A XOR with B.
Okay,
So
you're
this
actually
this has got to come from here.
now-
So taking it all back to their original values, that's how you can cross them out here. Okay.
You're not causing like more space for an extra variable, and then you're not, or you're doing it bitwise instead of actually doing the entire sum.
Yeah, okay, so some things to think about, right? So whatever, space-wise, yeah, using one extra variable, but I don't know. How long is it going to take you to read this code and figure out what it actually does, like what the purpose is of these 3 lines? Versus this, can you reason about what the values are of A or B after this line? I can say A was B and B is temp and temp was A, so you swap A and B. So the short version is this is like unmaintainable, terrible code that if you ever do this for performance reasons, you better put a comment on the top that tells what the code is supposed to do and why you're doing it. Yeah.
In the third line, if you're inserting that A XOR B in place of A on the right-hand side, wouldn't the B's cancel out and it would just be saying A equals A?
All right, let's change our numbering a little bit. We'll say A0 and B0, these are the original values. And we'll say this is A1, this is A2, so this is a technique that's called, well, whatever, it doesn't, single static assignment, so we're only ever assigning to a variable once. This is A1 because we're using this value of A. B here is, which B is this? B0, and we're creating a new B, so this is B1. And this is what? XORs of what? A1 and B1? Okay, now if we break this down, right? So we have A2. Well, let's start with B. I think that's easier. Okay, so I start with B1. So B is going to be B0 XORed with what? A1, which is A0 XORed with B0. And if we have X XORed with X is equal to 0, and we have 0 XORed with Y is always equal to Y. So these are properties we're using of the XOR function. So these XORs cancel each other out. Or technically they would go to 0 XORed with A0, and then we would say this is equal to A0, so we'd say B1 is equal to A0. Everyone good on that part? And the next line, so we'd say A2 is equal to A1, where A1 is A0 XOR B0. A0 XOR B0. And then B1, which we know from this that we just proved, B1 is equal to A0. A0. By the same logic, B's cancel out to 0. 0 XOR B0, which is just equal to B0. So you finally get B1 is equal to A0 and A2 is equal to B0. That make sense? And generally, I would prefer this code 99.99999% of the time than the other code. Any other questions about this? Yeah.
So, as you mentioned, that from that first equation, when alpha equals the cipher text times the plain text. So,
Not times, XOR. You're talking somewhere here.
so in that case, you would have to know the plain text and the cipher. Well, yeah, you have the cipher text, you don't have the plain text. So it's not the like approach you want to go for, say for our assignment, but I guess a closer approach would be taking two cipher texts and like.
Yes, if you have two ciphertexts that are encrypted with the same key with XOR, you can easily XOR each of the characters and get out the right key.
Would you have to know the key in order to get two?
I'm not certain. Maybe. That's a good question. Oh, okay. Better example. Wow. Why did I go down this rabbit hole? Okay. I'm just going to erase a bunch of stuff, but it'll be here on the lecture, so on the slides. Okay. Much better idea. Rather than worrying about all of that, cool. All right. So before we started down this crazy path, yeah, I think you're all right. I was wrong. So, all right, I will ask for more letters. Okay, so we get a message 2 that we know has been encrypted with the same key. This is the right way to approach this. There we go. Cool. We get a message 2. Somebody give me letters. Give me letters.
Y.
Y, G,
Z.
X, Z, T, L. Okay, perfect. So, I now have the second message that I know has been encrypted with the same key. So I have two messages that are encrypted with the same key. Great. I cannot use my silly trick because that doesn't work. You are all correct, so I could not demonstrate that. But what do I have now?
You now effectively have an alphabet for each letter of the key.
Now I have more than one character for each alphabet of the same letter of the key, right? So now here, I used to just have the alphabet in key 1 of Y and key 2 of Q. But now I have a second one, so now I can add this. I can say Y, G, X, Z, T, L. And I can keep doing that for every message I have, and now I can start to use statistics and all the other techniques that we talked about to break this key, right? Because they're reusing this key. Does that make sense? Yeah.
What if you made a book a key, and then you sent messages over the course of time, and each message was the length of that you were supposed to go to. So then after you go, so say your first message is 100 characters.
Sure.
You go 100 characters into the book, and then you go to the next message that's 75 characters. You pick up where you left off in the book, go another 75 characters.
Sure.
And then unless the person who was intercepting your message had both the book you were using and the length of every single other message you'd ever used, they couldn't do it.
Okay, let's think about that in the context here. So what's the problem? What's the core problem of what we just laid out? So we had one message, we sent one message. We said that was perfectly secure because we couldn't decrypt that. It would decrypt equally to every valid 6-letter message, right? But now I have 2 messages and 3 messages and 4 messages that are all encrypted with the same key. Now I have alphabets I can work with, and it's essentially a Visionnaire cipher. What's the key problem there?
Key isn't long.
The key, I reuse the key, right? So now let's say the case of I have, so now what if I knew that I had captured 2 messages, but I knew they were using a key of length 12. And so the first message was encrypted with the first 6, and the message was encrypted with, the second message was encrypted with the last 6. Now how many alphabets do I have? 12, not 6, right? So this is the core idea, and it's the same idea that was just stated. So if we have the key the same size as the message being sent, and if we were to share in advance A, and I'd say, what would be the problem of using a key that's from a book?
Well, that's all.
Huh?
A book is usually publicly available.
Book would be publicly available. What else?
Follow patterns in English.
There's patterns in English. You got patterns in your key that could potentially be used. So we talked about that when brute forcing. If we have to brute force through every random key, that's an effective brute force, but if we only have to brute force through, let's say, English sentences, that actually could maybe be done much quicker, yeah.
And then if you break one, you know the rest of their ciphers for the length of the book.
Right, so essentially your key is dependent on each other, right? So once I break and I know one thing of your key maps to one part of the book, then I can easily break the rest of it because I know the following keys. Whereas if they were all random, there'd be no way to do that. Even if I broke one key, they should all be sufficiently random. Cool. So this is to demonstrate that you should never ever reuse the key, right? And so in what circumstances would you want to use this? So or let's think about it this way. What has to be true in order to use something like this?
You have to have a way to safely communicate the keys.
Say again?
You have to be able to find a way to safely communicate the keys.
You have to have a way to safely communicate the key? Yep. What else?
Make sure you don't reuse the key.
You have to ensure that nobody reuses the key, right? So you should probably put some kind of policies or mechanisms in place. So the way, yeah, please.
Also, you have like limited amount of messages you can send before you need to meet again.
Right, so you maybe need to think about the key size you need and roughly how many messages are you going to send, because once you run out, you cannot communicate with them anymore or think that your communication is secure. What else? Yeah.
You have to find a way to like generate the key, right?
Yeah, so you need to find a way to generate the key. Why?
Because it's bad to use like phrases and stuff, and like computers can be, you can look at the seed for like computers randomly generating numbers sometimes.
Yeah, so the key needs to be sufficiently actually random, right? With each letter or whatever your elements of your key are equally randomly chosen. What's something interesting about the randomly generated letters we just did? Anybody notice it? Anything? Yeah.
A lot of the less used letters in the alphabet.
Yeah, so when you went random, you went to less used letters. That happened a lot, right? Z, X. So there's a human bias in thinking that a random letter is a letter that's unlikely to occur. What else? What about repeats? In an individual message of 6 characters, we had no repeats. I don't know, what would we expect? Somebody can do the math on the statistics there. Two messages of 6 characters, what's the likelihood that we repeat a letter? If it was actually random.
1 in 36, right? Or no, that's the odds that their keys will repeat, so the opposite of that. Because 1 in 6 and 1 in another 6.
1 in 6 of repeating characters with 2. I don't know, but there are odds, right? So if we had done this again, presumably we wouldn't be repeating characters, but that has a probability to appear, right? But as humans, we think, oh, random means there shouldn't be any of the same letter, and they shouldn't necessarily appear together, right? But of course, that can happen. So anyways, these are all good reasons for why this is very difficult. And so this gets into all the things we just talked about, this is actually a provably secure system, and we saw why, right? If we send a message, a 6-character message or whatever, with a key that's the same size, we can try to decrypt that to whatever message we want. But it's provably secure only if the key is truly random, right? So there's not bias in how the key is generated. Yeah?
Will we get into how you generate truly random keys?
Kinda.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about randomness. How would you generate this? How has it been done in the past, or how do you think it was done in the past? So think about before computers. So you can't use a computer. How do you generate random numbers?
Pull out of a hat, maybe?
Pull it out of a hat. So specifically how? Design me a scheme. A hat-based scheme. Yeah.
ping pong ball thing they use in the lottery.
Okay, ping pong ball in the lottery, right? So then what do? So you have what, 26 ping pong balls in a hat, and then what happens?
Take one out, put it back in, shuffle.
Take one out, look at it, write it down, and then you pull another one.
Put it back in.
You have to put it back in, and then what?
Shuffle.
Shuffle. Have somebody to shuffle your hat. Yeah. Why would you want to shuffle the hat?
Just pick the same one again.
Yeah, because depending on how deep, and then you have to how well do you train these people to actually effectively randomly pick a ball? Are they just picking one that's on the top? Because you do that and then drop it back in, and you just keep picking. You have high likelihood of picking the same number over and over again.
How about a wheel that you put on something with extremely low friction and intentionally designed to be very balanced and do lots of tests to make sure there's no weighting or symmetry to it, and then
Like a roulette wheel? Like a roulette wheel?
Yeah, like a wheel that you'd have like letters written on two slices of like Wheel of Fortune or something. And then you could have a machine that takes a random impulse to push the wheel at random.
Where does that random impulse come from?
A machine, you have a machine, or the random.
Where does that randomness come into the machine?
Oh, okay. Well, you can have it selected based on the bit that happens to be going with the clock or something like that. And like take the last bit of the time or something like that at any given moment, or a random bit of the time actually would be even better. You can generate randomly from another thing, such as when you have to push the button, it fires. Like you make it as complicated as possible. That's never. You could always try and tie it back into something, but that's a good approximation of that.
Yeah.
This is like very like over the top, like philosophical stuff. I mean, technically it's not if you're like intelligent enough, because like even the computers, like the random numbers that come out of computers all are the top variables. It's not like a computer can possibly get a random number.
Okay. Yeah.
You
So.
can see it's like very close, but it's like
Interesting. Yeah, I don't want to get into too much of a discussion on true randomness. There are, I don't know exactly how they work because it uses physics, but there are cards you can buy that plug into a computer that use some kind of, I think, decay of particles or something, which is uniform, but specific events are, as far as we know, random-ish. And so using those as inputs to then seed something else that can generate a large number of numbers. Yeah. But yes, these are all difficult questions of what you actually do. Even something you'd think as simple as time, like use the time. With a lot of these things, you can, and there's been like online poker games that have used the current time to seed a random number generator to shuffle the deck. And so based on what cards you get, you can actually do that for all of the times that you think that the server is running as, and then once you find the thing that gives you all the values, you actually can predict every single card that comes out. They've broken online poker games through this. Yeah, so this is actually a difficult question. This is why this if here is very important. It's provably secure only if these conditions all hold, right? That the key is truly random, that the key is as long as the plain text and is never repeated, and the key is never reused in whole or in part, right? This is another critical thing. I want to say it was the Allies, that the Germans in World War II were able to break or identify bias in the Allies' communication because they had people actually using, I think, a similar scheme of drawing letters from a hat, but some of the humans had bias, and then they liked some letters more than others. So when there was a letter they didn't like, they'd like put it back. Or I mean, I think the other theory was they could actually see the letters when they were picking. So you would like try to get a letter that you liked or didn't like. So there was actually bias in this human process of trying to generate randomness. And you can actually keep the key completely secret, right? In the sense of you have to transmit this thing that's as long as any message you're ever likely to send. That is probably long enough to send multiple of these messages because you have to transmit this securely. So what kinds of scenarios would something like this actually be usable or useful?
I mean, I feel like it would be most useful in situations where you only have to send that data once. Because
Okay.
then it doesn't matter. Oh, yes, again. The longer the path of computation.
So what's a real scenario? where you only want to send one message. Yeah, so maybe like nuclear code, so like launch codes or something like that. You wouldn't want somebody to be able to spoof that or steal that communication. What else? Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe like encrypting a password for logging in.
Okay, encrypting a password for logging in what sense?
Like log into like your bank account, you like to log in once per session.
Okay, yeah, so logging into your bank. Although, yeah, so then you'd have this problem of what to do. So you'd have to like go to your bank, right? And you'd have to share a random key and then go home, and then every time you logged on, you need to use that somehow, so you get a finite number of logins. Yeah.
Like sending a message over email.
Sending a message, so what kind of message though? Just every message?
No, it would be like each message that would be like an individual key, be separate from the other.
It's gotta be, but how many emails are you gonna send, right? You need to have keys that are large enough for every single email that you're ever gonna send to the person you're going to send them to, right? So you need to have pre-shared a key that's as long as any message you're likely to send to anyone. And you have to send it securely. So how do you send that securely to people? Right? This is the other tricky problem. Other areas where I know this has been used is in government communication. So like there's this famous like red phone that existed from the middle in the Cold War from the White House to the Russians. And so they could talk to each other and apparently use like a one-time pad system with like books full of random keys. How do you ensure that it's not reused again in whole or in part? Yeah? Throw away the page? Where do you think trash goes? Burn it. Burn it, yes. Destroy the page. Yeah, go further, right? Otherwise, you definitely would have spies outside your embassy combing through the trash, right? Code book, great. Cool. Okay, so what are the main drawbacks of these symmetric crypto systems that we've been talking about? Yeah.
Communicating the key.
Communicating the key, right? In any scheme, you have to communicate the key, and this is very difficult because how do you do this? Like, get more and more paranoid, right? So what do? Do you whisper the key to each other in a room? What are some problems there? Was it?
Wiretap.
Yeah, wiretap. Somebody may have wiretapped your room or is listening to the room. So how else could you do it? How do you encrypt the key with what?
With the other pre-shared key.
With another key. Where did you pre-share that key?
Another one.
With another key. Yeah, exactly. Right. It goes all the way down. Yeah.
So you could like put a cloth, like put your hand in their hand, put a cloth over it, and like use Morse code or something to send them.
What about audio sensors in the room that
Oh,
could?
like catching in their hands. You wouldn't really be able to audibly pick
But
it
you
up.
could hear. Microphones are pretty good, and they have sensors like a Kinect, right? That could tell, the LiDAR stuff, right? That can give high resolution imagery on people. What about? Okay, you said put a cloth over their hand, right?
Yeah, well, what for hands?
Well, what about you can see like this muscle on my arm moving when my finger moves? So if somebody has a video of that, they could correlate that with when my finger moves and break the message. Yeah.
What about like something with AR? Like if I send you a message, the only way that you can decrypt it would be something only you know, but
But how do I know that?
I mean like that, like
That's
you are.
something I know.
I guess
That
like,
you know.
I know, but like something like you are. Like maybe not something that somebody else can mimic. Unique to you.
But how do I know that to be able to encrypt the message?
I mean, I think this is pretty easily solved. Use telepathy.
Telepathy. Yeah, that would actually make this a lot easier, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can keep a guy on salary that's the key guy. He generates the keys.
Okay.
You send him over to the person who needs to decrypt. Only he knows it.
Okay.
And then he'll.
But how does he
decrypt it.
tell that person?
Well, he doesn't. He just goes there and then decrypts it for them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that.
So what about if that person?
Why would you trust this person? Although, in that sense, why wouldn't you just give them the message and have them transmit the message? You don't need crypto in that sense. Is there somebody that you trust to be your courier? Yeah.
Mostly besides technological stuff. So you just have to install your own like electrostatic field that shuts off all devices.
Okay.
Or an EMP, something like that.
What about old school stuff? I don't know. Would there be any other? Is it possible to do long? I don't know. Yeah.
In World War II, they would take the pad and the one stick and chop it off.
Yeah, so you could maybe, but there you have literal trusted communication channels of like your military ships. I don't think you have that with your bank. Is that correct? You don't have a secure communication channel with your bank of the military's, well, maybe the military will drop it off for you, but they're definitely gonna write it down, right? So this is the key problem, and now we're gonna introduce the classic crypto people of Alice and Bob who want to securely communicate. This is covered in almost everything of crypto. And we have this problem of how do we securely transfer keys? We either need to, that's like an interesting point, we can maybe trust a third party to generate a key randomly and tell it to us, but then again, we still have no idea that the other party that third party didn't actually steal our key. So, and this seems like, why does this seem like such a difficult problem? Or doesn't it seem super easy? Like you would solve this?
There's too many factors.
There's too many factors in what sense?
And like weaknesses in the system.
Of transferring the keys, right? It seems like this transmitting a key thing is a fundamental part of cryptography, right? And if you want to keep information secret, you must have some secret knowledge that's shared between two different parties. It turns out that is not the case. So the idea being, and the idea was here is how can we actually encrypt information without requiring a secure, shared, secret key? And this seems insane on its face, of like, how could you possibly securely trade information like this? And before I go in this, we're going to use an example. Okay, everyone have an imagination? No. Sorry, this may be more difficult, but okay, imagine that there is on this table a box, right? And it has a very special kind of locking mechanism. So it has 3 states. Straight up is unlocked. To the left is locked, and to the right is also locked. Okay? Everybody agree? Box on the table, old school lock. It's got a nice mechanism. It has different ways that you can turn it. So, what if we had a key that only moves the lock to the left? So we have a key that can, or let's say, what's this, counterclockwise? So we have one key that can only move the lock counterclockwise, right? So we have states A, B, and C. So it can only move it from C to B and then B to A. It cannot move it back from A to B or B to C. And then we have another key that we can move to the right. So this is a key that we can move to the right. Okay, so I keep one of these keys. I'll keep the key on the right. So this is my key. I'm keeping it secret. None of you know what this key is. But let's say I give every one of you well, let's stop that for a minute. We'll say I give one of you the key on the left, the key that only turns it to the left. Can you use this box to send me a secret message?
Yes.
How?
Put the message in the box.
Okay, to put the message in the box, let's say that the key box have to be in. B, the unlocked state. It has to be unlocked. So you open the box, what do you do with your message?
Put it in the box.
Put it in the box, and then what? Close the box. Good, you guys are getting this. And then what do you do? Turn the key which direction? You only have one direction to turn the key, right? Turn it to the left. Okay. Now what happens? Now, think about this. Can anybody else, so somebody a bad person, well, someone want to pretend to be a bad person? Sure. Okay, so you come up to the box. You want to modify the contents of that box. Can you?
Only if I have your key.
Only if you have my key? What if you had the same key that the person originally had, this key?
No, you can't do it.
Why not?
Because you can't turn it all the way
I see the message. Now, what do I know about this message?
It was put in there by somebody who had the key that turned left.
It was put in there by somebody that has a key that turns left. Do I know who sent the message? No. Right? I actually don't know who sent the message. What do I have to use to decide who sent the message? Who supposedly had the key? If you all had the key, could I know who had it?
No.
And I also couldn't necessarily, if I gave the key to one person, can I trust that they didn't lose it or give it to somebody else? Right, so what would I have to use to try to decide who sent the message?
The message itself.
Yeah, the message itself, but still I couldn't trust that, right? So, but I do know what. What do I know about that message?
They had the key.
They had the key, and what happened to that message after it was put in the box?
Yeah. You know that nothing's happened to it since then. It's under the assumption you have the right turning key in the field.
Yeah, so it's under the assumption that I'm the only person that has this right turning key. I know that nobody has touched or modified this message since it was put in the box. Cool, right? Did you have to know my private key, this right turning key to send me a message?
No.
What did you need? Yeah, just the left turning key to send me a message. Okay. All right, let's say that I have a message that I want to send you. Like, whatever, the midterm is canceled or something. Right? So if you just got an email or a message, well, let's say message, but let's say you came in and there's a piece of paper on a desk in here that says the midterm is canceled. What should you do?
Take a picture of it.
Take a picture of it and then what?
Post it online.
Leave? Would you trust that message?
No.
Does it have my signature on it? Sure.
It could still be.
How do you know what my signature looks like?
Extensive background check.
Weird. Did you actually? I don't think that's actually true. But
More importantly, if you know what a signature looks like, someone else might have taken it or just done it. So.
yeah, I signed everything that's put in front of me, so multiple people have my signature, right? So this is something that's very easy to come by. It's not a standard feature. It's not a secret feature necessarily. So fundamentally, if there's a piece of paper here on this table, you don't actually know who wrote that. You don't know if I wrote it. Similar to the previous case, we only have what the content of the message is to try to see who the identity is of that person. Okay, can I use my box in order to tell you a message that you know comes from me?
Yeah, but only one of us.
Okay, so the box is on the table, so I want to leave a message that you all know comes from me. What can I do?
Okay, it's open, you put the
Unlocked, then what happens?
Open it, put the message in.
message in.
Open it up, put the message in, since the midterm's canceled, you can all go have fun. And then do what?
Close it, turn right.
Close it, and then what?
Turn it right.
Turn it right with my key. So I use my key, I put it in the unlocked position to the right. And now what happens? So one of you comes to class, and now you see this box on the table, so what do?
Take out the key.
Yeah, you take that other key, the key that turns left, and now what? Turn it to unlocked, open it up, read the message, and then what do you know exactly at that point? Yeah, it's me or the person who has my private key, the secret key, right, sent this message, the right turning key, right? And you know this for a fact, and you know that that message has not been modified since it was put in that box. Because if you had a key that was, oh, actually, is that true? Getting ahead of myself. What else more do you know? Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, if you're not the first one to open it, then someone could have modified it.
So, okay, so let's go through that. So but how do you know that you're the first person that's opened it? So in what circumstances?
You're the first person who's opened it because it was in the right state.
It was in the locked state?
One person has, no, not in the locked state, in the right locked state specifically.
Right, so it's C. so this is very important then to essentially think about what's the state of the system, right? So what state is it when you come across it, right? So only in the case that it's been in state C where it's been locked, you know that can only happen with my key, a key that turns it to the right. If it's unlocked, you know nothing, right? So you could say anybody could have put anything in this box. Nothing is safe. Cool. And so, this is actually the basis of, and of course it doesn't work with actual keys and weirdness like this, but this is the core intuition behind asymmetric cryptography, and also known as a public key crypto. The whole idea is everyone has two keys. So a public key, so Alice and Bob both have a public key, which we'll call P, and they also have a secret key that we call S. And this is exactly how they use this. So in this sense, this public key A is something, the key that turns left is something I can give everyone on Earth, right? And they can't impersonate me or leave messages as me, right? And they can use that key to encrypt a message such that I'm the only person that can decrypt it with my secret key. You can look up, I stole this from here. Really good resource of describing this. Excuse me. Cool. Okay, so let's torture this analogy slightly more, right? We said that it's impossible when I get a message, so it's been locked all the way to the left. I can look at the box, I can see, a message for me. I can unlock the box and I know that that message hasn't been tampered with or changed, but I don't know who it came from. Is there a way I can use something like this to know who it came from? Yeah.
Well, there's like some registry of public keys, and you can say, well, if my public key can unlock this one, I know that this particular person who registered my name with this public key will be using a private key.
Sure. So what do I need to do? How do I actually do it with these boxes that I'm talking about?
I was thinking maybe you can have more lock states, one for each person, and then have a
No,
public.
I don't have no lock states. That makes things complicated.
Okay.
Oh, you can get like a special box with your name in it, instead of you like.
Okay, say it again.
So the person who's sending the message could have a special box with their name in it, but they have box.
Yeah, so what if the person who sent it has a box, right? So they have their own box, and they also have their own public key and private key. Which key do I know? Their public key, right? I should never know their private key. It's kind of a trick question. I should never know their private key. But I have their public key, and let's say the key has their name on it. I got this key from you. I know who you are, blah, blah, blah. So then how do they use their box to send me a message? Say again?
They put it in the original box.
They put their message in their box, and then what?
Put it in the original box.
And then, what do they do with the lock on their box? So maybe somebody stole their box in an unlocked state. They turn it to the right with their private key. And then what do they do with it? They give it to me? Yeah. They say it again?
They use the secret key to type the other signature.
They use. So they use their secret key on their box, right? And then, but how can I guarantee that that message hasn't been tampered with or modified?
Can't you use their public key? Since you know the public key that they use.
Right, so then I think, okay, that's a good point. I just flipped the situation around. All right, this is good. All right, we'll stay there for now. All right, good, you saw through my ruse. Okay, and this is super cool. So here, assuming that we can get this to where it works, so what should be true for a system like this to work? Right, what could be some flaws in this system? Yeah.
You don't want a private key that can open more than one box.
So I wouldn't want to repeat private keys. Yeah, that would be bad, right? Yeah.
And, you know,
Man in the middle in what sense?
well, someone in the middle could use
say it's a special lock that doesn't quite work on because you can't lock their lock with your private key, and this is where this falls apart a little bit. We'll get into that more. Yeah.
Like you should be able to figure out the shape of the private key from the shape of the public key.
Yeah, so think about this. What information on this picture does everyone know? Do they know that the lock, do they know how the locks work? Yeah. What else do they know? The public key. So specifically, what don't they know? The private key. So it shouldn't be the case that you can take a public key and create or derive the private key, right? Otherwise that would defeat the purpose. Cool. So these are, but have we got over this fact of transmitting a message to me securely such that if we assume the box itself is encryption, that now you can share a message with me and know that it's been encrypted and we did not share a secret key? Yeah.
I mean, you can send a message to them, but if they send a message to you, anyone can read it since the key's public.
Yeah, so we need to figure out something to do with that. But in some sense, we've shared some secret information that so we've shared a secret message without sharing without sharing a key. Yeah.
So a question, since you're using an algorithm to encrypt it and decrypt it, doesn't that mean every public key is a one-to-one for private key?
Yes, sure. I actually don't know the answer to that. Maybe.
Because I was just saying, if you like found out a way to get a list of public keys, and then you can check like against that table for the private key.
Yeah, so you better make sure that, well, you assume that they know the public keys, so it better be the case that it's not able to go back even if they enumerated all possible public keys. Yeah. So you need to, the generation of keys actually becomes very interesting and difficult. And this actually was a problem in, I want to say Debian or some embedded systems where they weren't using enough randomness to generate keys, and so the keys were all in the same space. And they were able to break them that way. So, we get some nice things. We can get, as we'll see, we can get confidentiality from this, which is what we want. We get, as we saw, non-repudiation, right? So what was, somebody write this, what was non-repudiation again? Yeah, you can't claim that you weren't the one that took the action, so what scenario did we go over that demonstrated this?
Purchasing something, it's like you didn't purchase it. It's like
No. In the box example, specifically with this public key. Yeah.
I mean, if the key is returned a specific way, you know that it was done by a person who has that key. And so if the message is modified, if you have another key, you know it's not your problem.
Right, exactly. So in the case that I put a message there, I couldn't say, hey, there's no possible way, like I didn't write that message that said that the midterm was canceled, right? Because you could take a video of yourself unlocking it with your public key, and then at that point it's very clear this message came from me, right? Cool. So, and this is actually the underlying, basically, mathematics here, is you need something where it's easy to generate the public key and the secret key, but it's difficult to generate the secret key given the private key. Public key, sorry. The P being both private and public is difficult. The P is public, S is secret. So it's easy to generate the public key and the secret key. It's difficult to generate the secret key from the public key. And this makes sense. This is actually the fundamental tenet of this system, right? We need this to be the case, otherwise this whole system falls apart and it's not useful. And each party, yeah, so every party has their own secret key, and both parties, and the other thing that's important to remember is everyone knows everyone's public keys. We'll assume this for now, right? Both Alice and Bob know their public key, and including our famous adversary, who we'll call Eve, or eavesdropper. So Eve also wants to spy on this communication, and she also knows Alice's and Bob's public keys. fundamentally, we assume everyone knows Alice and Bob's public key, right? Public key, it's literally in the name, public. Everyone knows, right? Secret, who should know? Only the owner, right? Secret should be only the owner. Cool, so now we can think about these as functions that we can do and apply to messages, similar to how we thought about DES and AES. We could say they took in a message and a key. So the way we'll talk about these is Alice wants to send a message M to Bob. So then what does Alice use to encrypt that message if she wants to send it to Bob? Her private key?
Or Bob's public key.
Bob's public key, so what's the difference? Yeah.
If she was to crypto her private key, Bob would have to use her private key.
Say it louder.
If she used her private key, Bob would have to use her public key. And then if she used Bob's public key, he would have to use his private key.
Yeah, so it depends on what we want. So when we're talking about encryption, what are the properties we want? Confidentiality. We want nobody else to be able to know the contents of this message. So if we were to take this message and encrypt it with Alice's secret key, who can read that message? Everybody that has their public key. And who has their public key? Everyone. Yes. We can assume everyone has everyone's public keys. Therefore, we should use what to encrypt? So then let's walk through the scenarios, right? So okay, we said Alice's secret key, that doesn't make sense. What about Alice's private key? So can Alice use her private key to encrypt a message?
Yes, but it's confidential.
It wouldn't be confidential?
No, anyone could open it.
Anyone could open it? Who could open it?
You mean Alice's public key?
Alice, is that what I said?
You said private.
Okay, public key, yes, I'm thinking
Okay,
key.
so
Alright,
then
Alice's
only she
public
can read
key.
it. Then only she can read it.
Then only she can read it, right? It seems like a silly operation. You don't really need that, right? So, what was that? If Alice encrypts it with her public key, right? So it's a message is encrypted with Alice's public key. What key can decrypt that message? Alice's secret key. Cool. Can she encrypt the message with Bob's secret key? Why? Because she doesn't know it. Yeah, fundamental part. So the only thing we have left is Bob's public key. Right? So does Alice know Bob's public key?
Yes.
Yes, everyone knows everyone's public key. So she can take the public key, use it to encrypt the message to get some ciphertext C. And now how does Bob decrypt? Takes his secret key and does what? Yeah, decrypt it. And so, like we said, and I'm going to keep harping on this, what does we know? What does Bob know for certain at this point?
The message is sent and then has a new tamper.
Yeah, so since the ciphertext was created, it hasn't been tampered with. What does Bob know about who sent the message? Nothing. So does Bob know if it comes from Alice?
No.
What about Eve? Could it come from Eve?
Yep.
Yeah, all these things are possible, right? Because everyone has access to Bob's public key. So, the other way to think about this, yeah, please.
I still don't really understand why, a couple things. Well, why can't Alice can't use her public key? Why do we say that only Alice can read it in that case?
Sure, so Alice takes her public key, right? The public key is Alice, takes the message in the ciphertext C, sends it to Bob. Now what does Bob do with this?
But he has Alice's private key, public key, right?
He has her public key. So the message has been encrypted with Alice's public key. So what's the only key that can decrypt that message?
The secret key, which she has.
She's the only one that has that. Yes, Bob does not have that. Right? If we assume that, then we would be back to the symmetric crypto days, right? Where they both have to share the same private key. Cool. Good question. Okay. So now the important thing to think about is what can Eve get from this message? So what if Eve takes this message C, Because Eve wants to find out, she wants to eavesdrop on this message. She wants to find out the contents of this message. What if she takes that message and decrypts? So what does Eve capture? What do we assume in this scenario that Eve is able to capture?
Ciphertext.
Ciphertext. Should we assume that she can read the message? No, our system's already broke at this point if Eve can read our messages, right? So the only thing that gets transmitted is the ciphertext C. So Eve takes the ciphertext and encrypts it with, or tries to decrypt it with Alice's public key. Yeah, it'll return garbage, right? It doesn't work. It's not going to return N for certain. What about Bob's public key? Yeah, same thing, right? Nothing. So what does Eve know at this point? Not nothing. Eve doesn't know nothing. What does she know? Yeah, so she knows the ciphertext. And what does she know about the ciphertext? It's actually something that's interesting to think about. So that she knows she likely knows there's some communication between Alice and Bob.
Well, she doesn't know Alice, but she knows it's going to Bob because it's using Bob's public key.
She definitely knows that if she just steals it. Let's say she steals it in transit, right? So she knows the endpoints. We'll assume that Eve is better than we give her credit for, right? So we assume that.
She knows it wasn't encrypted with a private key.
Yeah, so she knows it wasn't encrypted with any of the private keys if she did this operation. She also knows the size of the ciphertext, right? Which could be interesting depending on the scenario. So this is again something that we talked about a little bit, is encryption doesn't by itself get rid of this notion that the size of the text can be revealed.
So
Yes?
this is also still acting under the assumption that it's still a relatively large enough key to be difficult to brute force, right? Because otherwise, while you can't decrypt with the public key, couldn't you in theory like come up with plausible messages and encrypt to try and find a match in a sort of brute force way? So
You would certainly try that, right? So that's like the known plain text attack. A secure asymmetric crypto system is immune to those kind of techniques.
yeah, because it has to be. Is it because of the size of the key or the size of the ciphertext, or what causes that immunity? I guess is what I'm saying.
Size of the key.
Size of the
So you can think about, they measure asymmetric keys usually in bit size of how much you would have to brute force. So it's not actually the size of the key, quote, quote, it's the how many guesses would you have to get to break this.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so then going on our notation, how does Alice make a statement M that she wants everyone to know is from Alice? She wants to stand by her message, yeah.
Couldn't she encrypt it with a secret key first?
Encrypt it with her secret key to get what?
So then she has a message that's decryptable by her public.
It's not a message. What is it? Ciphertext at this point, right? It's encrypting it with her secret key, right? So Alice can take her secret key, encrypt the message with that. And then, how does Bob check, is this statement actually from Alice?
Uses her public key.
Yeah, it uses Alice's public key to generate the message. And what does Bob know for certain at this point?
It's generated by Alice.
Yeah, Bob knows that Alice must have generated this message M. Or somebody who has Alice's secret key, we assume secret keys are secret, so he only knows that. What does Eve know?
Eve knows the message.
Eve also knows the message, right? How does Eve get the message? Yeah, it uses Alice's public key, right? So interesting to think about the eavesdropper at this point knows exactly the same information as Bob does. But this is, again, inherent in what what Alice is trying to accomplish here. She just wants to state a message that she can stand by and and that everyone knows comes from her. How do we get both? Right? So we have, so Alice wants to send, and this sounds like something we'd more want to do, right? Alice wants to send a message to Bob that he knows that it's from Alice and that nobody else can know the contents of that message, right? We want both of these properties. Yeah.
Is this where you have to start using the, okay, so you send a message safely, and then if they respond to that message, using part of that message initially sent as the key?
No, we're not going to worry about protocols. I just want to send one message to Bob. That Bob will know is from Alice, and will know that nobody else can read that message. Yeah.
Alice encrypts it with her private key, so he'll know that's from her.
So Alice first takes a message, encrypts it with her private key,
And also encrypts it with Bob's public key.
and then takes that output and encrypts it with what?
Bob's public key.
Bob's public key, so that way, so they get some message C, right? So you can think of these are mathematical operations, so we can pick first, we apply, so we encrypt it with the secret key of Alice, and then we encrypt that with the public key of Bob. So you think of it like an onion, right, with like layers. So think about who can take off these layers. So, who can modify the outer layer? Bob's secret key, right? So the secret key of Bob gets rid of that, and then what gets rid of the next layer? Alice's public key to finally get that message. And so what does Bob know for certain at this point? Yeah, he knows that this message M came from Alice and that nobody else has read this message along the way. Right? So now we actually have a super cool application here. And now what can Eve do with C? So Eve steals C. What can she do?
Nothing.
What does she have access to? The public keys. Can she get rid of this outer layer? Sorry, this outer layer? She can't get rid of this outer layer. Right? So Eve knows nothing at this point except for everything we talked about of actually knowing that a message was sent, the length of the message. But here we've been able to get a way of passing a message securely from one party to the other without ever sharing the key in advance. This is super cool stuff. The other thing to do, you want to check your understanding. If you flip these operations, why would that not work? Yeah.
Would be because Eve.
No, think about it on your own.
Oh, got it.
Unless you want to sit around here for a minute.